Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week, as the people of Mali mourn the death of former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, a political crisis is still hovering across the country, and that's because the current military rulers want to do things their way and not be pushed by regional body ECOWAS. What has happened is that other international bodies are also towing ECOWAS's line of action. Later in the program, the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under fire to resign after it was discovered a party held at his office residence on May 2020, with the Prime Minister and his wife present, despite COVID-19 restrictions enforced at the time. The topic has gotten Britons taking sides as many MPs call for Mr. Johnson's resignation. Joining me to discuss this later is a President, Central Association of Nigerians in the UK, Kanuk for short, Mr. Ayo Akinfe. That's Diplomatic Channel in the wrap. Let's check in on those other topics in diplomatic circles, and we'll be right back. Tennis superstar Novak Djokovic has left Australia after a court upheld the government's decision to cancel his visa, capping days of drama over the country's COVID-19 entry rules and his unvaccinated status. The unanimous ruling by a three-judge federal court bench dealt a final blow to Djokovic's hopes of chasing a record 21st Grand Slam win at the Australian Open that starts on Monday, January 17th, 2022, dismaying his family and supporters. The Serbian player went to the airport in Melbourne just hours later. In a roller coaster ride, the world's top men's player was first detained by immigration authorities on January 6th, ordered released by a court on January 10th, and then detained on Saturday again, pending Sunday's court hearing. Finally, hundreds of Hondurans and Nicaraguans on Saturday congregated in the northern Honduran city of San Pedro Sula and began to march towards the United States, the first of such caravans to be formed this year in Central America. The caravan set off days before leftist president-elect Xiomara Castro takes office in Honduras on January 27th. She has vowed to revive the economy and combat corruption that stokes waves of mass migration to the United States. The migrants, mostly young people, carrying backpacks on their shoulders and women with children, left a bus terminal in the northern city of San Pedro Sula for the border post of Corinto in an attempt to enter Guatemala. Welcome back. He was ousted in 2020 when a group of soldiers stormed the presidential palace, took him hostage alongside other members of government. Since then, he's been in ill health and now he's dead. Former Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta will never see democracy return to Mali. Right now, no one knows when that will be either.
Former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was 76 years old when he reportedly died in his home in Bamako. The cause of his death is not known, but it may have been due to health challenges. Having led the country from September 2013, he was ousted in August 2020 by soldiers who held him hostage for a few days and forced him to resign before he was released. The soldiers quickly announced an interim transition government led by Bo Ndol, with Colonels Assimi Goïta as vice president. The country was already facing a political turmoil when this happened, as anti-government protests were rife over his handling of the jihadist unrest. Weeks after, he suffered a minor stroke and was flown to the United Arab Emirates for medical treatment. But Mali was not done with coups. On May the 24th, 2021, tensions had come to a head after a cabinet reshuffle not approved by the vice president. The military's power over key ministers was not changed. However, two leaders of the coup, Sadio Kamara and Modibo Kone, were replaced by Ndol's administration. Later in the day, increased military activity was reported by several sources, including the U.S. Embassy in Bamako, although the capital city remained calm. Journalists, however, reported that three key civilian leaders, Ndo, Wayne and Dekore, were being detained at a military base outside Bamako. Goïta later announced that Ndo and Wayne were stripped of their powers because they tried to sabotage the transition. Colonel Assimi Goïta later named himself president. Attempts by regional body ECOWAS to steer the country back to its path of democracy have been met with roadblocks as the military leaders refuse to barge on a 5-year transition plan.
Indicated that the transition to respect the date of 27th February 2022.
ECOWAS, determined to keep leaders in check on January the 9th, 2022, announced more sanctions on Mali, including closure of members' land and air borders, the suspension of non-essential financial transactions, the freezing of Malian state assets in ECOWAS commercial banks, and recalling the ambassadors from Bamako.
Et sociale visant la refondation du Mali.
Regional Monetary Union UEMOA also instructed all financial institutions under its umbrella to suspend Mali with immediate effect, cutting off the country's access to regional financial markets. Malian authorities condemned the action, saying they will affect populations already hit hard by the security crisis and health crisis, especially COVID-19.
Redoubler de vigilance et à rester mobilisés.
Interim leader Assimi Goïta, during a broadcast on Monday, called on Malians to unite and act as defenders of the nation in the face of the sanctions. He said, "I have to say that even if we regret the illegal and inhuman nature of some decisions, Mali remains open to dialogue with ECOWAS in order to find a consensus between the interest of the Malian people and the respect of the organization's fundamental principles. Our commitment to a return to a normal, secure and peaceful constitutional order has never failed. We once more call on ECOWAS to thoroughly analyze our country's situation while putting the interest of the Malian people above all considerations."
La situation de notre pays en plaçant l'intérêt suprême de la population malienne au-dessus de toute autre considération.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell says the European Union will impose sanctions on Mali in line with measures already taken by ECOWAS. Mr. Borrell told reporters that the risk that the situation in this country deteriorates is evident, that the EU's move is a response to the arrival of private military contractors from the Russian Wagner Group, whose members are mostly ex-service personnel. France has thousands of troops fighting Islamist militants in the Sahel region and in December joined 15 other countries, mostly European states operating in Mali, in condemning the possible arrival of mercenaries. In December, the 27-nation EU imposed sanctions on Wagner and set up a new sanctions regime for Mali with a view to targeting the junta. French officials have said consultations are underway between France and its European partners on how to respond and whom to sanction. Decisions are likely by the end of January. Sweden has decided to withdraw its troops this year from a European Special Forces mission to the Sahel region and will review its UN contribution after the arrival of private Russian military contractors in Mali. The Swedish Parliament approved the deployment of up to 150 soldiers to Takuba in 2020, and it has some 250 military personnel as part of the MINUSMA.
Two things are very worrying in Mali. One, that we now know that there is a Wagner Group, which is a private company, but mainly with Russian private soldiers and security personnel. And if they have a stronger and stronger impact, then it will be not possible to continue with those large number of troops from us. And we have been very strong together with other troop givers in this. And the other thing is that the 18 months the transition government said there will be democracy in election, they have now proposed 5 years. That is unacceptable for us, but especially ECOWAS has put strong sanctions on Mali. We will discuss this in our parliament on Tuesday. I and the defense minister will be there. And of course it will have consequences.
Even the United Nations has waded in with a special representative of the Secretary General for Mali. El Ghassim Wane told the Security Council that efforts should be made to resolve challenges in the country's transition process.
En vue d'un compromis avec la CEDEAO.
Let's switch gears now to the UK, where another political crisis is brewing. This concerns the Prime Minister's attendance of a party at number 10 Downing Street's Garden. And more Britons learn details about the party and the Prime Minister's presence there. And more divided the country has become about him remaining in position of Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months. I know the anguish that they have been through, unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want, or to do the things they love.
The British Prime Minister offering an apology to MPs on Wednesday, January 13, for attending a Bring Your Own Booze gathering at his official residence during the first coronavirus lockdown, as opponents say he has to resign. Mr. Johnson admitted for the first time that he had attended the party at Downing Street on May 20, 2020, when social gatherings were limited to a bare minimum, and said he understood the anger that the revelations caused.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The revelation has angered MPs and Britons alike, especially for those who could not be with family and loved ones because of the restrictions. One lawmaker broke down in tears as he questioned the government on the party.
In Northern Ireland, we reached a milestone of 3,000 deaths due to COVID just last week. 3,000 people who followed the rules and grieved today. So will the paymaster, including my mother-in-law who died alone, will the Paymaster General confirm that there will be a full and complete disclosure to enable the police service to ascertain that all was done decently and within the regulations at the date and at that time? I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Asked by opposition leader Keir Starmer if Mr. Johnson would do the decent thing and resign, Mr. Johnson said he would not preempt the findings of an independent inquiry into the parties.
After months of deceit and deception, the pathetic spectacle of a man who's run out of road. His defence that he didn't realise he was at a party. It is so ridiculous that it's actually offensive to the British public. He's finally been forced to admit what everyone knew, that when the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
I regret very much that we did not do things differently that evening, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, and I take responsibility and I apologise, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister's former Health Secretary broke the rules, he resigned. Yes. And the Prime Minister said he was right to do so. When the Prime Minister's spokesperson laughed about the rules being broken, she resigned. And the Prime Minister accepted that resignation. Why does the Prime Minister still think that the rules don't apply to him?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's not what I've said, and I understand the point that he makes. As I've said, Mr. Speaker, I regret the way things happened on the evening in question, and I apologise. But if I may say to him, I do think it would be better if he waited until the full conclusion of the inquiry, until the full facts are brought before this House, Mr. Speaker, and he will then have an opportunity to put his points again.
People in London were divided on Wednesday over whether or not Mr. Johnson should resign after his apology.
I hope that he would go after 2 years. Well, 2 years is up, and actually he needs to go. He's setting a bad example of Britain across the world. My American friends think it's appalling.
It isn't acceptable that he and his colleagues have behaved in the way that they have. An apology doesn't really cover it off, but I don't feel that a Prime Ministerial resignation would really help the nation at this stage.
Foreign Minister Liz Truss says real mistakes were made when parties were held during the lockdown at Downing Street.
The Prime Minister apologised on Wednesday. He was very clear that mistakes have been made. But I do think we need to look at the overall position we're in as a country, the fact that he has delivered Brexit, that we are recovering from COVID. We've got one of the fastest growing economies now in the G7, and we're delivering the booster programme. And he has apologised.
While members of the Prime Minister's government struggle to ward off calls for his resignation, Mr. Johnson's actions over the next few days will be watched closely to see if they match his apology. A number of British politicians insist the British Prime Minister broke the law and lied about it, especially opposition Labour Party leader Keir Starmer. British Conservative Party chairman Oliver Dowden does not believe the Prime Minister should resign, but says he must address the culture within his government that resulted in multiple staff gatherings at his residence during the coronavirus lockdown.
I think he broke the law. I think he's as good as admitted that he broke the law. And after all, Downing Street has now apologised to the Queen for some of the parties that have gone on. And I know that the government's holding position is let's all wait for the Sue Gray report. But I think it's pretty obvious what's happened. There's industrial scale partying that's been going on at Downing Street. Not much of it is really denied. And I think that the public have made up their mind. I think the facts speak for themselves. I think the Prime Minister broke the law. I think he then lied about what had happened.
It's important that there is a full investigation into all of the facts, and that's why the Prime Minister set this up. But I would also say, and that I completely appreciate your underlying point on all of this, this event was totally wrong. It shouldn't have happened. The Prime Minister has rightly apologised for it. People feel angry about what's been going on in Downing Street. I feel angry about what's going on in Downing Street. But the correct process now is to get to the full facts and then for the Prime Minister to appear before Parliament, which he will do, and to be held to account. But I can assure you the Prime Minister is both very contrite and deeply apologetic for what happened, but also, more importantly, is determined to make sure that this can't be allowed to happen, and that we address the underlying culture.
Our Britons have been watching the whole scenario play out and also have mixed reactions. Joining me now is the President, Central Association of Nigerians in the United Kingdom, the Umbrella Association serving the collective interests of Nigerian associations, unions, societies and groups in the United Kingdom, Mr. Ayo Akinfe. He joins me from London. Thank you for joining me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much.
Are you also of the opinion that the British Prime Minister should resign because of those parties that held at number 10?
Well, to be honest, I think his position has become untenable. The British authorities have been very, very robust in enforcing the restrictions and the guidelines. Once he's been found to be breaching them, I really don't see how we can get out of it. It's a case of, Britain's been built up on the basis of there's one law for everybody, whoever you are. So, it's going to be hard for him to escape resigning.
And how would you rate Mr. Johnson's leadership during the pandemic?
Well, it's been hit and miss, to be honest. There have been some things that got totally wrong. There have been some things they've been very robust on. And to be honest, they were learning as they were going along. So, it wasn't plain sailing by any stretch of the imagination. But at least the one good thing I would give the government was they were actually listening to the scientists and they were letting the science determine policy. So in the main, they have listened to the scientists. So, probably give you, 5 out of 10.
I know that it is important to note that Mr. Johnson remains a popular politician in the UK right now, though some say he may not be forced to resign because it does not have a successor. You think that's correct?
I don't think that's got anything to do with it. If you break the law, you break the law. That's the nature of British legal society. That's the way British society runs. The health secretary was found to have breached the guidelines and he was asked to resign. If Mr. Johnson has to resign, the British politics is robust enough to throw up a successor. The Conservatives in the House of Commons will have a leadership contest. They will come up with somebody else and someone will take over. So I don't think that's not a valid argument. British politics has never held still because there's no successor to a sitting prime minister. Even during World War II, Winston Churchill had he faced something like 4 or 5 votes of confidence, and there wasn't a successor. So I don't think that's the issue.
So what is the issue for you?
Well, to be honest, the issue is it justifiable for the prime minister to remain in office or to go unsanctioned when those who breached guidelines were punished heavily? People were fined very heavily. If you were caught having a party or throwing a party during a lockdown, you paid fines of sometimes up to £10,000. Now, if the prime minister is making those laws and enforcing those laws, the issue is, should he be exempt from the same kind of punishment everybody else is? I think that's the issue.
Yeah, and it's looking like he might be going scot-free. He has Oliver Dowden in Parliament, who one of his ministers who's been fighting really hard for the Prime Minister to stay on. He did acknowledge the Prime Minister did make a mistake, but he says that's not enough for him to resign. He will continue as Prime Minister. Your thoughts?
Well, to be honest, I think it may come down to a vote of confidence in the House of Commons. It may just be that. Lord Stammer may just, the Labour Party may be forced to table a vote of no confidence. Yeah, it's likely the Prime Minister could win it because Conservative MPs will rally behind their leader. But at least the point will have been made that, the House of Commons objected to this and passed the vote of no confidence, or, at least had a vote of no confidence. So even if the Prime Minister wins it, I think he'll be sufficiently chastised to know that what he did was out of order.
Boris Johnson has apologized. He acknowledged he was at the party on May 20, but only briefly. And that was to thank staff before going back into his office. He said 25 minutes later that he spent 25 minutes at the party and then later left to continue working. He even called for top civil servant Sue Gray to continue her investigation. He made the apology to MPs, but it also goes, without saying that this is an apology to the nation as well. Do you accept his apology, or do you think he did nothing wrong to apologize for, or you think the apology really doesn't capture the gravity of what he did?
To be honest, personally, I would let it go if it was down to me. But the problem with letting it go is that it negates the entire COVID policy of the government. You see, COVID, we've been able to restrict COVID in the UK because of the robustness of the government policy. Those who are enforcing the rules have not given any quarter. If you found breaching it, you get sanctioned, you get fined, you get charged. Remember the health secretary, as I said earlier, he was forced to resign because he breached them, and it wasn't even, his breach wasn't as great as that of Prime Minister Johnson. So if we sweep this one under the carpet, it undermines the whole policy. And that is why I don't think the apology will suffice, because it's not just what he did personally, it undermines the entire structure, the entire health policy of the government.
Finally, opinions are divided across the country right now. You have a side already, of course. What does that predict, though, for the Prime Minister's political future?
Well, I suppose he's been fatally wounded. I mean, you look at his rating in the opinion polls, it's very low. It's an all-time low. To be honest, I think this is probably just going to be, it's kind of a swan song. He's kind of in the twilight of his prime ministerial career anyway. I just think this is probably going to be the last straw. He'll probably, I don't know, stay on for probably another year max maybe and just say, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm off. Because I think he's just been fatally wounded to a point whereby his authority has been eroded. He's no longer going to have, the kind of moral strength to act as decisively as he would like to.
Mr. Kimfe, thank you again for joining me on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's the program this week. Thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.